I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good. And you have a book out that's free, huh?
Yeah, just released it at framingpaterno.com a couple of weeks ago. It's called The Betrayal of Joe Paterno, and just go to the framingpaterno.com. No obligation, no money. We're all about the truth here, and it really tells a very different story than what the public believes, or at least most of the public believes, about what happened in the Jerry Sandusky scandal. And it also includes, by the way, the entire 3.5-hour transcript of my interview from prison with Jerry Sandusky, which was fascinating to say the least. And we also have some new evidence in the case that has never been presented previously, including Joe Paterno's final Attorney General interview, which he did 2 weeks before he was fired, and which directly contradicts the Freeh report and indicates that Louis Freeh withheld exculpatory evidence in the case. So there's been a lot going on, despite what the media will tell you. But unfortunately, the media has been a major problem in this story from day one.
The media has been a major problem in this country for about the last 50 years, where they just don't seem to want to seek the truth. They want to sensationalize and not report all the facts. And if we haven't seen that time and time again, and why we think this would be any different, because they had an agenda, which is to bring down, I think, a guy who was a role model, a great figure, and they wanted, for whatever reason, he was not liked. Then once they had the chance to destroy him, they did.
Well, that was part of what happened, but I want to make very clear, for instance, the framing in Framing Paterno is not meant literally. It's figurative. I'm not a conspiracy person, and I think it's very dangerous for us who believe that the media is, in fact, broken in this country, and with good reason, to come off as conspiracy people. We're not. This is really just the way the media works now, and I think it's actually more of a ratings agenda.
No, yeah, I get you. Oh, no, yeah, but also I hate to say this, but I was in a newsroom years ago, and I happened to be doing a game show at a TV station, and I saw what a bunch of lazy asses they were, too. It wasn't just a matter of the way their ratings driven, but also they're lazy. Somebody sends them a press release, and they read it verbatim from some group that has an agenda. They really don't. You think that they're out there digging up stories. They're not. They're not.
No, you're 100% right. It's everything. It's ratings, it's personal agenda, political agenda, it's laziness, and it's stupidity. It's a perfect storm, and we've seen all of it in this Joe Paterno story. People have no idea, they really don't, of the real story, which is why I wrote the book, The Betrayal of Joe Paterno, and put it on the website for free. It's completely different than the media narrative. From day one of this story, almost everything the public thinks they know about the story is false, and we're starting to make some progress. I don't know if you saw it, but last night, Bob Costas on The Tonight Show actually said that he does not believe that Joe Paterno was part of a cover-up. Now, he did it rather tepidly, and I've spoken with Costas on a couple of different occasions, and he has read the book, and he has seen me on the Today Show, and he has seen the Jerry Sandusky interview. We've worked hard on trying to turn him around, but unfortunately, partially because of the strategy of people like Scott Paterno, who I believe has been misdirected in embracing most of the media narrative in a misguided attempt to try to salvage the situation, I believe Scott Paterno has made exoneration, or at least people like Bob Costas arguing for exoneration, almost impossible, because it's just too risky for a guy like Bob Costas, who has a lot to lose.
Wait, so how is Scott messing it up?
Well, Scott has embraced a strategy, and it is a strategy. It's not a search for the truth, that I believe embraces far too much of the media narrative, which I think one of the biggest mistakes that the Paterno forces made, and I understand why it was made, but they made many. But one of the number one things people don't understand about this case is that Jerry Sandusky is, in fact, a pedophile. But if you look at the details and you look at what he was actually accused at the 50-yard line on Saturday afternoon at Beaver Stadium. It's just not true. The reality is that he fooled a lot of people. Joe Paterno had no idea he was a pedophile, and Penn State had no idea he was a pedophile. And frankly, the evidence against Sandusky, while he is a pedophile, is not nearly as dramatic or compelling as most people believe that it is. In fact, I believe that if his name was Michael Jackson, he'd be playing golf right now. That's not a defense of Jerry Sandusky. That's just the truth.
Okay, so in other words, he was sleeping with young boys or doing stuff, but he may not have been going as far.
It's impossible to talk about this in 15 seconds. I wrote a whole book about it.
Yeah, gotcha.
I go into great detail. I'm not defending Jerry Sandusky. I'm trying to put it in proper context to understand why what happened. My agenda here is the truth.
But you believe...
I didn't go to Penn State. I have no connection. Scott Paterno and the Paterno family have made it clear that they're not embracing what I'm doing, although Jay Paterno silently, I believe, agrees with me based on my conversations with him. But the reality is this is all about trying to find out what really happened here. Joe Paterno said before he died, I just want the truth to come out. And I believe that at framingpaterno.com, we've come close to that real truth than anybody else has. And I think that the preliminary hearing this week proved a lot of what we've been saying. I think the preliminary hearing really showed the case against Penn State to be based on a fraud. I don't think there's ever going to be a real trial in that case. I think that the prosecution is going to try to save face and try to claim that it had to be dismissed on a technicality because there is no case there. And the preliminary hearing proved that. I've written extensively about that at framingpaterno.com.
So, but to be clear, you definitely believe Sandusky is a pedophile?
Yeah, I spent 3.5 hours with him in prison. I've written back and forth with him many times. I've talked to his wife even more than he has. By the way, his wife, Dottie, absolutely believes he's innocent, which I think is important, not because it proves his innocence, but it shows how easily people can be fooled about these situations. And also, by the way the court case went, unless Dottie Sandusky, his wife, is in fact lying, which I don't think she is, then at least 2 of the primary 4 accusers perjured themselves because their testimony was directly contradictory, which I think is an important point to make. The reality is that while Sandusky is a pedophile, I'm not positive he's the type of pedophile the prosecution made him out to be, and the evidence against him was not nearly as strong as the public perception, and that is a large part of why Penn State did not realize the problem they had on their hands. And as far as I'm concerned, the most important part here is there is zero evidence that Joe Paterno did anything wrong. In fact, I argue, Bobby, that Joe Paterno handled this situation far better than anybody else involved. And the notion that he has been crucified here and his statue torn down, record taken away, legacy destroyed, and not even allowed to praise him publicly is one of the greatest travesties I've ever seen in my life. And again, I have no connection to Penn State. I believe in the truth. I can't stand what the media is doing to this country, and this is one of the worst examples of media malpractice I've ever seen. And I've done 3 documentary films on the issue of media malpractice, including a movie of that title about the 2008 presidential election.
Wow. All right. And so I think the strategy, if I'm getting from you, is that the Paterno family is embracing the trial. And they go, oh, see, McQuarrie said that Joe said, "Watch out for the Maine," and old Maine blew it.
Right.
And there was a folder in Schultz's drawer, and he told somebody, "Don't look at it." So it all supports our theory that they covered it up, not Joe. And you're saying, don't even go there.
Well, yeah, and I've had many, and in fact, it's in my book. I have a transcript of a phone call I had with Scott Paterno arguing over basically this exact point. I believe that they have created a strategy that essentially checkmates Joe Paterno, because I think that they don't fully realize that the way the media works and the way human beings work and the fact that people have just basically forgotten about this story. They've decided that they know what happened. While in parts of Pennsylvania it's still a very hot story, nationally it's basically dead. And the reality is that as long as people are accepting this false monster caricature of Jerry Sandusky, they will always believe that Joe Paterno had to know because he was the god of State College. Not that that's an accurate representation, but that's what people will always believe.
Yeah, but let's put it a different way. Ariel Castro.
Right, exactly. No, that's a great example.
Right next door. Next door. And
that is an outstanding example. I think the Aaron Hernandez situation is also emblematic of this. But what people don't understand about the Paterno story is the key things that happened is that when the story broke, it was a perfect storm of situations. The Board of Trustees at Penn State panicked. What they did was proceed as a guilty plea on behalf of Penn State when they fired Joe Paterno. And the reason why the media pressure was so intense was because it was a slow sports week. Just before Thanksgiving, basketball was in a strike, baseball had just ended, and Joe Paterno had his final home game scheduled for the end of that week. That gave the media a very specific timetable and a pressure point to use to totally change the story from a Jerry Sandusky story, which it was at the very beginning of that week, to a Joe Paterno story, which it turned out to result in his firing that week. And from there on, forever on, after that, Bobby, I believe that was the original sin of this case. People like me have been going uphill into the wind on ice with lead bricks around our feet because people can't get over the notion that Penn State fired a legend like Joe Paterno if he wasn't guilty.
Right. The Betrayal of Joe Paterno, the book, and then FramingPaterno.com is where you can see that book and the documentary, FramingPaterno.com, John Ziegler. I'm going to interview him after this show for an interview for Lehigh Valley Magazine, and we'll podcast that up at WAEB.com as well.